He awoke to the hum of sacred machinery, a slow, aching pulse that reminded him of a heart trying to remember how to beat. The air was thick with incense and ozone, the taste of burning prayers clinging to his tongue. When he opened his eyes, the world was not the one he knew. No forests, no storms, no care to return to. Only the endless dark, the void between stars, and the silhouette of a planet below, glimmering with the dim light of war. Geralt of Rivia, monster hunter of men and myth, stood upon the observation deck of an Imperial cruiser. Through the great armor-glass viewport, he saw a world burning under twin suns, its surface scarred by bombardment, its oceans evaporated into ash. Somewhere down there, the Vox spoke, the weak hiss of a dying astropath whispering, "Demons walk in the manufactorums." He did not understand the machine spirit's language, nor the sigils that hung like icons of forgotten gods, but he understood monsters. He always had. And in this new age of steel saints and gilded corpses, there was no shortage of them. Some wore flesh, some wore armor, and some, he would learn, wore faith. As he descended toward the world below, the stars seemed to pulse like open wounds, and he wondered, not for the first time, if every world was just another village in need of cleansing, or if this time he had stepped into something far older and far worse than any curse his own world had ever whispered. If you can still hear me across the void, traveler, then you too walk where the light has long since died. Stay with us. Walk the path of the Witcher through the Imperium's shadow. Subscribe not to a channel I know, but to the hunt itself. Because what you'll see next is not a tale of good and evil. It's a chronicle of survival in a universe that has forgotten both. The dropship's hull screamed as it tore through the ash-choked atmosphere. Fire streaked the viewports, a crimson storm dancing across the reinforced glass as re-entry burned the heavens alive. Inside, Geralt sat silent, gloved hands resting on the hilt of a blade that did not belong to this world. Its silver gleam looked almost sacrilegious against the matte black of Imperial steel. Around him, Skitarii guards moved in mechanical rhythm, their bodies humming with liturgical static, the holy recitation of circuits and code. Each carried the scent of oil and incense, the perfume of a civilization that had replaced blood with function. When the ramp lowered, heat flooded in like a living thing. The ground below was a wasteland of slag and skeletal manufactorums, their silhouettes jagged against the orange haze of endless industry. Towers of smoke rose like cathedrals, their spires carved not by faith but by labor. Geralt stepped down into the dust, the air tasting of iron and burnt promethium. Beneath his boots, the earth vibrated with the pulse of hidden engines, and the faint hum of something vast. A machine so large it could have been mistaken for a mountain, were it not for the rhythmic clang of its heart. A tech priest awaited him at the landing site, a silhouette of metal limbs and human ruin. From beneath a hood of red cloth, dozens of mechadendrites whispered and clicked, each one busy with a different ritual, polishing, adjusting, murmuring binary prayers to the Omnissiah. The priest's voice rasped through a Vox grill, flat and distorted. "You are not of the Imperium." Geralt's eyes lifted, pale as frost. "No," he said, "but I hunt what others fear. Then you will serve. Fear is inefficient." The priest turned, leading him toward the labyrinthine sprawl of Sindera 9. The world was a tomb of progress. Conveyor belts stretched into darkness, carrying rusted shells of servitors whose flesh was stripped to make room for steel. The Witcher's medallion trembled faintly against his chest, a whisper of warning that pulsed with every passing machine. He had felt it stir before, near necrophages, cursed places, and beasts born of chaos. But this was different. It vibrated not in dread but in mourning. Down below, through the catwalk grates, Geralt saw thousands of workers, men and women who no longer looked human. Their faces were pale masks streaked with grease and devotion, their eyes glazed as they chanted hymns to the machine god. Chains clattered with every prayer. Every movement seemed rehearsed, as though their souls had long been replaced with a code they could no longer read. He followed the tech priest deeper into the manufactorum's gut, where light dimmed to a feverish red. The air grew thick, metallic, alive with static energy that crawled beneath the skin. He could hear whispers through the machines, faint, fluttering syllables as if someone were trying to speak from inside the pipes. When he reached for his steel sword, the medallion flared again. "Do not touch it," hissed the priest. "The spirits of the machine must not be disturbed." Geralt ignored him. The vibration beneath his feet had changed. It was not mechanical now. It was breathing. They reached a corridor where the walls were slick with oil and blood. The smell of both was indistinguishable. A door sealed by purity seals stood before them, the wax still wet from a recent benediction. The sigils burned with faint red light, the mark of the Omnissiah cracked and trembling. "What's behind it?" Geralt asked. "Waste reclamation, organic matter, failed constructs." The Witcher studied the seal for a moment, then drove his boot into the door. It shattered inward, metal shrieking like something wounded. Inside was a chamber filled with twisted bodies, half flesh, half circuitry. Servitors lay in heaps, their limbs fused with piping and servo arms that twitched long after death. But some still moved. One lifted its head. Its face was smooth metal where eyes should have been, its mouth an open cavity leaking coolant and prayer. From that mouth came a voice that should not have existed. Soft, broken, familiar. "Geralt," he froze. The voice was unmistakable. Triss. For a heartbeat he forgot the world he stood in. But when he stepped closer, the illusion dissolved. Her voice became static, her form a ruin of wire and bone. The trick of the mind or something far worse. The warp had many ways of mocking memory. The tech priest advanced, reciting canticles of cleansing. "They are errors of production," he said. "Malfunctions to be erased." Geralt's hand closed around the hilt of his silver sword. "Where I come from," he said, voice low, "we call them cursed." The blade flashed once, a clean arc through smoke and shadow. Sparks and blood mingled on the floor. The machine things convulsed, their prayers turning to screams that faded into static. When it was over, silence returned. Only the slow drip of oil echoed. "You destroy the Omnissiah's children," the priest said, voice trembling with outrage and awe. Geralt wiped the blade against his coat. "They weren't your gods," he murmured. "Not anymore." He left the chamber without looking back. But as he stepped into the rust-lit corridor, he caught sight of something etched into the steel walls. A sigil drawn in blood. Not Imperial, not Mechanicus, something older. A circle bisected by a sword surrounded by runes that pulsed faintly in the red glow. He didn't recognize the language, but the pattern was unmistakable. It was a Witcher's sign, the sign of Yrden, burned into metal older than memory. The realization hit him like a blade between the ribs. He wasn't the first. As the manufactorum groaned and the distant vox began to whisper his name again, Geralt understood that Sindara Nina's monsters weren't just machines gone mad. Something had been calling him, across worlds, across time, and now that he had answered, it wasn't going to let him leave. The hunt had already begun. The rain came in sheets of black fire. Prometheum storms, they called them. Liquid flame and chemical rain that rolled off the hive towers in glistening trails, catching on the broken statues of saints and martyrs that lined the streets. Every droplet burned for a heartbeat before hissing out in smoke. Geralt moved through it like a shadow wrapped in steam, his cloak slick with oil, his hair matted with soot. Beneath his boots, the steel floor plates thrummed with the pulse of buried engines. Above, the smog pulsed faintly with the light of orbital bombardment, distant, rhythmic, like thunder from another realm. Sindara 9 had no night or day, only shifts of illumination. One moment amber, the next scarlet, as the artificial suns that powered the manufactorum cycled their glow to maintain the illusion of order. Geralt had lost track of how long he had been hunting the voice that whispered through the vox lines, a distortion that repeated a single word. Spliced. The trail had led him deep beneath the surface, where the manufactorum's arteries fed into what the Adeptus Mechanicus called the flesh vats. The air was warmer here, thick with the reek of metal, blood, and alchemical rot. Steam rolled in clouds that shimmered with faint color, chemical illusions that danced like ghosts when touched by light. The Witcher's medallion trembled continuously now, a faint vibration that gnawed at the edge of his senses. He came upon a vast chamber filled with glass columns, hundreds of them, each one containing something that writhed. Not servitors, not men. The creatures suspended within were pale and twisted, their limbs elongated, their flesh threaded with wires that pulsed like veins. In the flickering light, their faces changed, human for a breath, monstrous the next. Geralt could feel the hum of alchemical corruption in them, but it was overlaid with something mechanical. Someone had learned to graft life onto circuit. From the darkness above, a voice descended, metallic, elegant, patient. Fascinating, isn't it? How easily boundaries crumble when purpose demands it. A figure descended along a mechanical rail, robes of red and gold glimmering in the half-light. His skull was shaven, his eyes replaced with spinning lenses that focused and refocused as he regarded Geralt. Limbs of polished brass unfolded from his back like insect legs. "Magos Biologus Harcane," the Witcher said, voice low. "You're the one the priest spoke of." "I am what the Omnissiah requires," Harcane replied, his vox voice modulated into a liturgical calm. "The flesh is a design. The Mechanicum perfects it. You, however..." His gaze scanned Geralt's body like a dissecting tool. "You are an anomaly. Mutation without worship. Function without prayer." Geralt stepped closer, his silver sword glinting beneath the light of the vats. "You've been making monsters." "Monsters?" The Magos almost sounded amused. "A crude term. I refine humanity. I remove its inefficiencies, pain, hesitation, mortality. I take the Emperor's image and make it eternal." Geralt looked around at the flickering forms within the glass. "They're screaming. Data does not scream. It reacts to correction." The Witcher's jaw tightened. "You've heard their minds." For a moment, the Magos hesitated, the faintest flicker of something human. Then the lenses whirred faster as if suppressing it. "Emotion is a byproduct, purgeable. You, on the other hand, retain too much of it." He raised a mechanical hand. From the shadows, Skitarii surged forward, their bodies glinting with augmetic plates, faces covered in bronze masks engraved with binary prayers. Their rifles hummed with energy. Geralt drew his blade. The first shot cut the air like thunder. He was already moving. His reflexes, honed by decades of combat and alchemy, turned him into a blur among the steel columns. Sparks lit the darkness as blade met metal, the hiss of ignited promethium filling the room. Each swing shattered a mask. Each movement left a trail of molten rain. The Witcher's signs flared faintly, a shield of shimmering force here, a burst of kinetic flame there, not as strong as in his own world, but enough to remind the universe that his mutations were more than biology. When the last Skitarius fell, twitching and sparking on the floor, Geralt turned back to Harcane. The Magos had not moved. Only the lights on his frame pulsed with faster rhythm. Excitement, perhaps, or anger. "You misunderstand your place," Harcane said softly. "You are a relic of superstition. I have dissected miracles greater than you." Geralt raised his sword. "Then dissect this one." The Magos extended his arms and the vats began to shatter. Glass exploded outward and the creatures within tumbled free. They moved not like animals but like ideas struggling to remember their bodies. Spines twisting, faces flickering through forms as if reality itself couldn't decide what they were. Geralt slashed through the first, its blood sizzling like acid. The next lunged with limbs of metal and flesh screaming in two voices, one mechanical, one human. He fought until his muscles burned and his breath came in fire, but there were too many. Each kill left him slick with oil and ichor, surrounded by the stench of decay and smoke. Somewhere in the chaos, Harcane's voice echoed through the vox lines, calm and cruel. "You will understand in time, mutant. Perfection always begins with failure." Then the floor gave way. Geralt fell through a collapsing platform into darkness, crashing against a lower deck. His vision swam, his head ringing. When he rose, he found himself in a tunnel lined with broken servitors. Some were still alive, whispering fragments of code that sounded like prayers. Others reached for him weakly, their human eyes pleading for release. He moved among them in silence, blade in hand, granting them mercy one by one. Each life extinguished left a shadow in the air, a lingering hum as though the machine spirit mourned. When it was done, he knelt in the stillness and looked at his reflection in a pool of leaking coolant. For the first time, he saw what the Magos might have seen. Not man, not beast, but something balanced between both. Above, the vats roared as flames consumed the upper levels. The smell of promethium filled the air, sharp and pure. Geralt sheathed his sword, his eyes catching the reflection of fire in the glass. Somewhere, far above, the vox whispered again. Not in imperial tongue this time, but in elder speech. The words chilled him to the bone. Kaer Morhen awaits. He stared into the burning dark. There was no way back. But if Kaer Morhen existed here, if something had followed him into this place, then the hunt was far from over. He turned toward the flickering tunnels ahead, where light bled like wounds along the walls, and began to walk. The scent of promethium clung to him like sin. The hymns began long before dawn, if such a thing as dawn still existed beneath Sindaranami's perpetual haze. The sound came from deep within the manufactorum's lower sanctums, a slow and rhythmic chant that vibrated through the iron bones of the city. It wasn't the harmony of faith, but the echo of programming, thousands of voices reciting litanies encoded into their breath. Geralt moved through the narrow corridors as the chant rose and fell, the words mechanical yet haunting, each syllable catching in the vents like ash. The tunnels grew smaller the deeper he went, the air thick with the tang of rust and burnt oil. Moisture dripped from the pipes above, carrying a bitter metallic taste. He followed the sound until he reached an open chamber lit by pale industrial lamps. Hundreds of workers knelt before a towering machine idol, its form carved from the carcasses of ancient servitors. It loomed like a god made of broken prayers, its face an assembly of hollow visages welded together, its mouth forever open in silence. A priest in flayed robes stood before it, his flesh interlaced with silver wire. The lenses grafted into his skull glowed faintly red as he turned to face the newcomer. "Intrusion is sin," he said softly, his voice amplified through a vox grill that crackled with static. Geralt stepped forward. "You're leading them?" "I serve," the priest replied, bowing to the idol. "We all serve. The rust must be appeased or it consumes. We oil our machines with faith." The Witcher's gaze drifted across the congregation. The workers didn't look up. Their faces were expressionless, skin pale and blistered from radiation. Some bore augmetics stitched crudely into flesh, cogs replacing eyes, mechadendrites in place of arms. Yet none of them moved without rhythm. Each swing of an incense burner, each bow was perfectly synchronized. Geralt's medallion began to tremble again. The vibration was stronger this time, a pulsing that matched the cadence of the chanting. He knew that rhythm, and it was the beat of a heart, a living one. He drew closer to the idol, eyes narrowing. Beneath the layers of rusted metal and tubing, he saw movement, the faint rise and fall of something breathing. The idol wasn't a statue, it was a body. The priest noticed his gaze. "Do not profane the vessel," he hissed. "It was gifted to us, the Omnissiah's mercy incarnate." Geralt reached out and brushed the cold surface. Beneath his fingers, the metal was warm. The medallion quivered violently, and a whisper escaped the seams. A human voice, faint, trembling. "Help me!" The Witcher recoiled. The voice was unmistakably human, though distorted by machinery. "There's someone inside," he said. The priest's mechanical limbs clattered against the floor as he approached. "There is faith inside." The flesh was weak. "We made it eternal." Geralt's expression hardened. "You turned a man into a shrine. The flesh offered itself. It is sacred to suffer for the machine god." The priest raised his hands, and from the shadows emerged armed acolytes, men and women half machine, half madness, each carrying tools repurposed into weapons. Geralt's silver sword hissed as it cleared its sheath. "Then your god can hear them scream." The acolytes rushed him. The fight was swift and brutal. Blades clashed with steel limbs, sparks scattering through the incense haze. Geralt moved like shadow-given form, his sword cutting through augmetic joints and reinforced sinew. Blood and oil mingled on the floor, indistinguishable in color or scent. He cast a sign, and a wave of kinetic force sent two attackers flying against the idol, their skulls cracking against its metal surface. When silence fell, the priest was the last left standing. He had dropped to his knees, not in defeat but in worship. "Do you hear them?" he whispered, eyes unfocused. "The machine spirits weep. They know you do not belong." Geralt sheathed his sword slowly. "You're right," he said. "I don't." He moved past the priest and toward the idol. The whispers had grown louder now, clearer. The voice inside repeated a name, not his, but something older, resonating with familiarity. He found a panel near the base of the structure and tore it open. Steam burst out, followed by the faint heartbeat of a dying life. Inside, beneath tubes and wires, lay what was left of a man. The figure was barely recognizable. Most of his body had been fused to the machinery. Only one eye remained human, the rest encased in metal plating and sacred sigils. His lips trembled as he spoke, the sound mechanical and wet. "They said I would become holy." Geralt crouched beside him. "You became their idol. Please." The voice cracked, part human, part machine. "End it." The Witcher did not hesitate. He pressed a hand against the man's chest. murmured a prayer from a world that no longer existed, and drove his blade through the core. Sparks erupted in a brilliant flare, and for a moment the entire chamber fell silent. The workers froze mid-chant, their mechanical hearts skipping a beat. Then the idol began to collapse, metal shrieking as it tore itself apart. The priest screamed, his voice blending with the sound of failing hydraulics. "Blasphemy! You've doomed us. Maybe I saved you," Geralt muttered. He turned and walked away as the structure came down behind him, the chanting dying into static. The workers fell to their knees, blank eyes staring at the ruin that had been their god. Some wept. Others simply waited, unsure what to do without instruction. Outside, the storm was waiting. Acid rain hammered against the metal ground, washing away the blood and ash. Geralt stood beneath it, letting it burn against his skin. He had seen many faiths in many lands, but none so efficient in their cruelty. Here, faith was not belief, it was industry. A process, a function. He looked up at the towers vanishing into the smoke, and for the first time since arriving, he felt something unfamiliar stir in his chest. Not pity, not anger, something colder. He whispered to no one in particular. If there are gods in this world, they don't make men. They break them. The medallion trembled again, a faint chime against his armor. Not a warning, a call. Somewhere above, through the rain and ruin, a new signal pulsed across the Vox. Encrypted, sharp, deliberate. It bore the mark of the Inquisition. Geralt's eyes narrowed. The hunters had found him. He pulled his hood over his head and vanished into the storm. The cell was a cathedral of silence. Cold, vast, and lit only by the dim blue glow of the lumen strips that traced holy geometries across the adamantium walls. Geralt sat chained to a chair forged from the hull of some long-dead starship. The cuffs around his wrists hummed with a faint energy that numbed his skin. His medallion had been confiscated. The absence of its familiar weight left him feeling strangely naked, as if some part of his instincts had been blindfolded. He had been taken 3 days prior, or so the interrogator had told him. The Inquisition had descended upon Sindera 9 like a blade through rot, cleansing what they called spiritual contamination. Fire and orbital bombardment had done the rest. When they'd found Geralt amid the wreckage, surrounded by the corpses of priests and servitors alike, they'd assumed him part of the heresy. No words he offered changed their minds. Now the silence was his only company. Until the door opened, a woman entered, tall, wrapped in robes of black and crimson. Her armor bore the sigil of the Ordo Hereticus, its twin-headed eagle engraved with gold. Her face was calm, severe, and far too tired for someone her age. She carried no weapon, yet the air seemed to bend around her presence. "Geralt of Rivia," she said, as if tasting the name. "That is what you call yourself." He looked up slowly. "That's what I am." She circled him, each footstep echoing against the stone. "There are no records of your world in any Imperial archive. No mention of your genetic lineage, your mutations, or your order. Yet you bear signs of structured alchemy and gene forging. You are a contradiction." "I've been called worse," Geralt muttered. The Inquisitor smiled faintly, but it didn't reach her eyes. "I am Inquisitor Morovia of the Hereticus. You stand accused of xenobiological interference, unlicensed mutation, and consorting with warp-tainted entities. Do you deny it? I don't even understand half of that." "Precisely," she said, "which makes you dangerous." From within her robes, she withdrew an object wrapped in sanctified cloth. When she placed it on the table between them, the chains around Geralt's wrists began to hum louder. He could feel it before he saw it, an aura, vast and cold like the echo of a storm frozen in time. Morovia unwrapped the relic. It was a helm. Burnished gold, its surface etched with prayers so fine they seemed woven from light. Even damaged, its form radiated impossible craftsmanship. A custodian's helm. Unmistakable. "This was recovered from the ruins of a temple orbiting Mars," she said. "The Mechanicus claim it still hums with psychic residue. The Emperor's own will, some whisper." Geralt's eyes narrowed. "You believe that?" "I believe in evidence, and this relic reacts to the presence of anomalies." She paused, gaze steady. "It reacts to you." She lifted the helm and the room's temperature dropped. The lumen lights flickered. The air grew thick with the scent of incense and ozone. And beneath it something older, a metallic tang that reminded Geralt of blood on snow. "Touch it," she said. He hesitated. "I've seen cursed things before." Morovia's voice softened. So have I. Reluctantly, he reached out. The instant his fingers brushed the golden surface, the world ruptured. The cell dissolved into light, not blinding, but infinite. He stood not in metal walls, but upon a plain of ash beneath a black sun. Vast shapes towered in the distance, statues perhaps, or corpses of gods turned to stone. A golden figure stood at the horizon, luminous and still, its face lost to radiance. When it spoke, the sound came not as voice, but as thought, vast and sorrowful. You should not be here. Geralt tried to speak, but the words disintegrated before leaving his mouth. He took a step forward, and the ground beneath his boots cracked like glass. Through the fissure, he saw not soil, but stars, countless, dying, drifting into the void. The figure continued, "The strands of your world do not belong in this weave. You are a question that should never have been asked." Then came a whisper, soft, familiar. "Wolf," he turned sharply. A silhouette stood behind him, faint as smoke, and a woman's form, hair like flame, eyes like sorrow, Triss. But when he reached for her, her face warped, replaced by the pale mask of a custodian, then by nothing at all. The light began to collapse. The figure of gold raised its hand, and 1,000 voices screamed through the warp. Prayers, songs, cries, all merging into one endless roar. For a heartbeat, Geralt felt the weight of 1,000,000,000 minds straining toward a dying god. Then everything went black. He woke on the floor of the interrogation chamber, gasping. The helm lay beside him, smoking faintly. Morovia knelt over him, her expression unreadable. "You saw something," she said quietly. Geralt swallowed hard. "A dream." "Dreams are for those who sleep," she replied. "The Emperor does not." He stared at the relic, its surface dimming. "That wasn't the Emperor," he murmured. "That was something else." Morovia studied him a long moment. "The Mechanicus claim the relic's resonance is harmless," she said. "Yet every psyker who touches it dies screaming. You didn't. I've survived worse. That may be why you're still alive." She rose to her feet, her robe trailing across the floor. "The Ordo Hereticus believes you to be warp-tainted. The Ordo Xenos believes you're a biological weapon. I think—" She hesitated, rare uncertainty flickering across her face. "I think you were brought here. By who?" "That is what I intend to find out." The chains around his wrists disengaged with a hiss. "You're letting me go?" "No," she said. "I'm taking you somewhere else. Somewhere the lines between faith and flesh blur into prophecy." Geralt flexed his wrists, blood returning to his hands. "And if I refuse?" Morovia smiled for the first time, and a sharp, humorless thing. "Then I'll have you executed. Consider this a pilgrimage, not a choice." She turned toward the door, the helm held close to her chest. Geralt followed, his boots echoing in the long, cold corridor. Somewhere in the distance, the ship's vox murmured a single word, distorted and broken. Witcher. He did not know if it was warning or welcome. Either way, he followed her into the dark. The ship that bore them through the void was called the Penitent Sky. Once a battleship, now a cathedral of steel and prayer. Its corridors were lined with ossuaries, its engines wrapped in scripture and incense. The hum of the warp drive sounded like the chanting of monks beneath the skin of the ship, rhythmic, mournful, endless. Geralt stood in the observation deck, staring into the warp storm outside. Rivers of impossible color flowed through the glass like veins of molten glass, twisting and folding upon themselves in shapes no sane mind could name. Occasionally, shadows moved within them, great winged things that might have been alive or might have been nothing more than reflections of nightmares. He didn't trust the void. It whispered. Behind him, Inquisitor Morovia stood at a prayer altar, murmuring rites of protection. Servo skulls hovered above her, each one inscribed with sacred text and bearing faint candlelight that flickered against the steel walls. When she was finished, she approached him. "Uncomfortable?" she asked. Geralt didn't look away from the window. "I've seen monsters. I've fought things that crawled out of dead men's dreams. But this," he gestured toward the churning warp. "This feels alive, like it's watching back." Morovia's gaze followed his. "You're not wrong. The warp is thought given form, desire without restraint, fear without end. To stare too long is to let it remember your name." "Then I'll try not to introduce myself," he muttered. She almost smiled. Almost. Then her tone shifted. "We're bound for Sol," she said. "More specifically, the vaults beneath the Luna Citadel. A place few are permitted to see. The Mechanicus believe your biology may hold anomalies of value. Geralt turned, frowning. Value to them or to you? Both. You survived the custodian relic. You resisted psychic backlash that should have burned your mind hollow. That makes you either a miracle, she paused, or a weapon. I'm neither. Everyone is something, she replied quietly. Hours later, or perhaps days, for time meant little in warp transit, the ship broke through real space. The storm dissolved into the serenity of the Sol system, its light pure and sterile. Ahead lay Terra's pale moon, wrapped in defenses and gleaming spires of silver. As they descended, Geralt could see the great void docks filled with ships the size of cities, their hulls covered in prayer sigil and armor thick enough to withstand gods. The landing was silent. No fanfare, just cold precision. They were escorted by robed figures of the Adeptus Mechanicus, bodies more metal than flesh, faces hidden behind lenses that clicked and refocused like insects' eyes. The air smelled of oil, ozone, and burnt incense. Geralt's boots echoed as they led him down into the vaults. Beneath Luna's surface lay an empire of machinery, cathedrals of gears and flame, rivers of molten steel poured through glass conduits, illuminating frescoes carved into the very rock, scenes of humanity's wars, their triumphs, their betrayals. Statues of the Emperor loomed everywhere, each one vast enough to shame mountains. In the deepest vault, Morovia paused. This is where we part, she said. For now. Not staying to watch them take me apart. She gave him a measured look. If they try, I'll stop them. You may be useful yet. The doors opened with a hiss of sacred seals. Inside waited a circle of magi, their robes crimson, their limbs replaced by mechanical limbs that whirred softly as they moved. At the center stood Archmagos Rival, his skull encased in gold filigree, his voice a symphony of whispers layered over one another. Subject designation, Geralt, he intoned. Confirmed genetic deviation, extensive. Unregistered alchemic markers. Muscular and neural patterns inconsistent with baseline human structure. Curious. I'm right here, Geralt said flatly. Indeed, the Archmagos replied, and yet you should not be. They led him to a dais of black marble surrounded by machines that hummed with restrained violence. Servo arms unfolded above him, tipped with needles, scanners, and vials filled with glowing fluid. The scent of alchemical reagents hung in the air, familiar yet not. As the first instrument touched his skin, Geralt felt the familiar burn of dissection. His Witcher training made him stoic, but beneath the surface his instincts screamed. Not from pain, from recognition. The machine was scanning not just flesh but memory. Visions flickered behind his eyes. Kaer Morhen in winter, the trial of the grasses, the faces of those long dead. Each image pulled apart by mechanical precision. The Archmagos watched in fascination. Remarkable. Neural lattices exhibit recursive architecture. Memory encoded within cellular strands. A living archive. Get out of my head, Geralt growled. The machine's hum intensified until suddenly one of the vials shattered. A burst of blue fire erupted, shorting several servos. The Magi recoiled, shouting Binharic prayers. Geralt's chains broke. His eyes flared golden. He rose from the dais as the room plunged into chaos. Energy arced through the machines. Screams echoed. From the shadows, Morovia entered, gun drawn. Enough, she commanded. Stand down. The Archmagos turned to her, mechanical voice quivering. The subject is unstable. Its essence rejects the machine. Geralt's breathing slowed. The blue fire dimmed, leaving only smoke. You tried to cut open something you don't understand, he said coldly. Be glad it didn't cut back. Morovia approached him carefully. You triggered something when you touched the custodian helm, she said. That energy, it's not warp. It's something older. He looked at her sharply. Older than your emperor? Perhaps, she whispered. Or perhaps it is him in another form. A fragment of the flesh divine. Silence filled the vault. Even the machines seemed to hesitate. Geralt flexed his hands, feeling the remnants of power hum beneath his skin. Alien, heavy, and not entirely his own. What now? He asked. Morovia's expression darkened. Now we follow the trail that began when the gods bled and men pretended they could clean the stains. The Archmagos turned his head, mechanical eyes gleaming. "You do not understand," he said. "This is not heresy. This is creation. The Witcher is proof that divinity can be spliced." Morovia's voice became a whisper of iron. "And that," she said, "is the reason entire planets burn." Outside, the alarms began to howl. The ship above them, the penitent sky, was under attack, and the thing that had once been a man, once a Witcher, once a ghost in a foreign age, realized the nightmare was only beginning. The sirens began as a low tremor through the vault walls, a mechanical heartbeat accelerating into panic. The lights dimmed, replaced by a throbbing crimson glow that cast every face in shades of blood. Somewhere far above, the ship screamed, a sound not of metal tearing, but of something deeper, older, wrenched from the fabric of the void itself. Geralt turned to Morovia, whose vox bead flared to life with a burst of static. "Repeat," she demanded. "Identify the aggressor." The voice on the other end was jagged with interference. "Unknown contact. Breaching from warp. Not demonic. Metallic signatures." The message cut to white noise. The Archmago's optics widened as he interpreted the data pouring across his augmetic lenses. "Not possible," he rasped. "Those constructs were purged millennia ago." "Who?" Geralt asked. The Archmagos turned toward him. "Necrons." The word dropped into the air like a blade through silk. The Mechanicus acolytes began reciting prayers in Binharic code, their mechanical limbs twitching with panic. Somewhere deeper in the ship's Vox network came the sound of weapons fire. Sharp, controlled, relentless. Geralt drew his swords in a single motion, the steel singing against its sheath. Morovia's face had gone pale beneath the light of the warning strobes. "They've phased into orbit," she said. "If they're here, it's not for conquest. They're hunting something." Geralt met her gaze. "Me." The Archmagos emitted a burst of binary that sounded almost like laughter. "Foolish pride. The Necrons do not hunt men. They hunt anomalies, disruptions in the order of matter. You are an error, Witcher, a fracture in their perfect calculus." The walls shuddered again, and a shower of sparks rained down from the ceiling. The floor split open, revealing conduits of white fire. From them rose the smell of ozone and scorched oil. The Magi scrambled to seal the breach, chanting in panic, "Move!" Morovia shouted. To the surface they ran. The corridors pulsed with light as emergency wards activated. Vox cherubs fluttered overhead, their faces painted with imperial scripture as they wailed warnings in broken high Gothic. Geralt's boots struck the floor in time with the klaxons, each step a drumbeat of war. As they reached the hangar decks, the first of the Necrons emerged from the smoke. They were not demons, no heat, no emotion, no corruption. Just cold inevitability given form. Their bodies were forged from living metal, green light burning from the hollow sockets of their skulls. Each movement was deliberate, efficient, ancient. The first fired its Gauss weapon, and the world ignited in emerald flame. The beam tore through a squad of Skitarii like paper, reducing them to ash and memory. Geralt felt the wave of energy graze his arm. It left no wound, but a strange numbness spread beneath his skin, as if his flesh had been momentarily rewritten. Morovia opened fire with her bolt pistol. Each shot a thunderclap that shattered armor and bone alike. Geralt moved beside her, the silver sword in one hand, steel in the other. He met the nearest Necron head-on, parrying a blade of pure energy. Sparks erupted as their weapons met, the impact reverberating through his bones. The creature's strength was monstrous, but its rhythm was predictable. Cold logic, no instinct. Geralt ducked low, slashing upward in a precise arc that severed the Necron's arm. The limb fell to the ground and began to crawl back toward its body, tendrils of green light reaching. He crushed it beneath his boot and drove the silver blade through the creature's chest. It didn't scream. It simply shut down. Around them, chaos consumed the hangar. Servitors armed with heavy bolters opened fire. Mechanicus priests recited kill litanies. Morovia barked orders to retreat toward the shuttle bays. But for every Necron that fell, 2 more phased into existence, stepping through reality as if it were nothing but smoke. Geralt felt the medallion on his chest vibrate violently, the strongest yet. The sound wasn't warning. It was resonance. The same energy that burned within the Necrons hummed faintly in him, as though the two forces recognized one another. Morovia saw his expression change. "What is it?" "They're not after me," he said. "They're calling me." Before she could reply, a Necron lord materialized at the far end of the chamber. Its armor was darker than the rest, its staff carved with hieroglyphs that glowed faintly green. Its eyes locked onto Geralt with the weight of aeons. When it spoke, its voice was a chorus of echoes, metallic and ancient. Crossworld anomaly, it intoned. Origin pre-imperial. Containment imperative. The cycle must be corrected. Morovia raised her weapon. He's under imperial protection. The Necron's gaze shifted to her. The Imperium is a shadow of a forgotten lie. Then, to Geralt, your presence fractures the design. You do not belong. Geralt's grip tightened on his sword. That makes two of us, they clashed. The Necron Lord's staff emitted arcs of disintegration energy that tore through the air like lightning. Geralt countered with fluid precision, dodging beneath each strike, closing the distance inch by inch. When their blades met, the impact created a sound like cracking glass, as if reality itself strained beneath the collision. Sparks lit the chamber in bursts of emerald and silver. Around them, the air grew heavy, the warp itself bleeding through the ruptured space. He felt the same alien pulse inside him. Not witchcraft, not magic, but something purer, older. It surged from his veins into the sword, igniting it in white light. For the first time, the Necron hesitated. Geralt drove the blade through its chest, twisting. The Lord's body convulsed, its circuitry screaming in silence. Green energy flared, and then it collapsed into dust. The others froze. For a heartbeat, the battle stopped. Then the Necrons began to phase out, vanishing one by one in bursts of light. The last to go were the warriors nearest to him, their eyes fixed not on rage or defeat, but on recognition, as if they had found the pattern they sought. When the silence returned, the hangar was a graveyard of metal and smoke. Morovia leaned against a shattered column, armor scorched, her expression unreadable. They came for something ancient, she said, and left because they found it. Geralt's sword dimmed, returning to its dull, familiar sheen. Maybe they found enough. The Archmagos limped forward, half his augmetics flickering. You wield power not meant for flesh. The Necrons sought to reclaim it. Geralt looked down at his hand, the faint traces of that white light still pulsing beneath his skin. Then we'd better find out what it is before someone else does. Outside the viewport, Terra shone like a dying ember, wrapped in its armor of faith and flame. And somewhere within that fortress world, something had begun to stir. Something watching, calculating, remembering. Geralt turned away from the window. His voice a quiet murmur drowned beneath the hum of dying engines. Whatever they woke up for me, he said, it's not finished yet. And far above, in the void where the Necrons had vanished, something vast and cold whispered back in kind. The sky above Terra was not blue. It had never been blue, not for 10,000 years. Instead, it glowed with a golden radiance that was both awe-inspiring and oppressive. The light of the Astronomicon spilling across the heavens like a perpetual sunrise frozen in place. It was said that this radiance was the Emperor's gaze, ever watchful, ever burning. To most, it was salvation. To Geralt, it was a reminder that even gods could bleed light instead of blood. They descended through the upper spires of the Imperial Palace, escorted by custodians clad in armor that shone like molten sunfire. Each movement they made was measured, perfect, silent. Men who were no longer men, sculpted into devotion itself. Geralt felt their eyes on him through their helm lenses, golden and unreadable. He could not sense hostility, but he knew the tension of a drawn bow when he felt it. Inquisitor Morovia walked beside him, her robe heavy with seals of authority, her stride unflinching despite the weight of where they were. The deeper they went, the more the air itself seemed to thicken. The walls were carved from living stone, inscribed with runes that pulsed faintly, as if the entire citadel breathed. Few see this place, she murmured, her voice low. Fewer still return. I'm honored, Geralt said dryly. Don't be. You're not a guest. You're a question they intend to answer. The corridors opened into a chamber vast enough to dwarf mountains. A single shaft of golden light fell from above, illuminating a structure at its center. Not quite a throne, not quite a tomb. The golden throne itself. It was a thing of terrible beauty, a fusion of machinery and corpse, flame and eternity. Countless cables and pipes fed into it, each one carrying the lifeblood of humanity's god-emperor. Geralt stared, feeling something inside him stir, a recognition he couldn't name. The air trembled faintly, as though the throne itself were breathing. A custodian stepped forward. his voice a low, resonant tone that carried the weight of 1,000 wars. "You stand before the undying master. Speak only truth. Conceal nothing." Morovia inclined her head in reverence. "He is an anomaly from beyond known reality." The Necron sought to erase him. The Mechanicus believes his nature intersects with something older than flesh. The custodian regarded Geralt for a long time, then spoke again. "The Emperor's light sees all things." Step forward. Geralt approached the throne. The golden radiance intensified until it felt like fire pressing against his skin. His medallion vibrated violently, the metal turning almost hot. A low hum filled the chamber, deeper than sound, older than speech. And then, for a moment, he wasn't there. The air vanished. The chamber disappeared. He stood instead on a vast plain of white sand beneath a black sky. Mountains of glass stretched to the horizon. In the distance, something enormous moved, a shadow that spanned worlds. A voice spoke not into his ears but into his mind. "You do not belong, yet you were made to fit." Geralt turned, sword half drawn, though he knew it was pointless. The voice was neither human nor divine, it was both. It carried the calm cruelty of the warp, the cold logic of the Necron, the sorrow of mortality. "What are you?" he asked. "Fragment," it said. "Echo. Memory of the one who dreamed humanity into chains." "The Emperor," Geralt murmured. "No, not entirely." The shadow shifted, and he saw within it a shape like a man made of light, but fractured, like broken glass held together by gravity alone. He was not one being. He was a multitude bound into flesh. I was one of them, the part that remembered mercy. Geralt felt the ground crack beneath his feet. "Why me?" "You were shaped by alchemy, by men who tried to make gods from mortals. You are kin to the same sin. When the walls between worlds weakened, the pattern of what you are resonated with what remains of me. The Necrons recognize the disturbance. The warp does too. You are both infection and cure." He clenched his fist. "Then what happens if I stay here?" "You become the wound," the voice whispered. "And the Imperium will bleed itself dry trying to close you." The vision fractured. The light collapsed inward, pulling everything into a single point, and then he was back. The golden glow faded. Morovia's voice broke through the haze. "Geralt, what happened?" He staggered slightly, his breath ragged. The custodian stood motionless, weapons half raised. The throne's light had dimmed to a soft, flickering pulse. "I saw something," he said. "A piece of him." "Of your Emperor?" Morovia's eyes narrowed. "What did it say?" "That he's not whole," Geralt said. "That something of him was lost. And that piece recognized me." The custodian stepped forward. "Blasphemy," he said flatly. "No fragment of the Master speaks. He is beyond division." Morovia met his gaze, unflinching. "And yet the throne flickered. You saw it too." The custodian hesitated, a fraction of a second, but enough. Geralt looked back at the vast machinery and the body entombed within it. He thought of the voice, the light, the weight of the words that still echoed in his skull. "If he's dying," he said quietly, "then what happens when that light goes out?" The custodian's answer was immediate. "Then humanity dies with him." Morovia turned toward Geralt, her eyes sharp, calculating. "Maybe," she said softly. "That's why you're here." The hum of the throne deepened, a pulse that rippled through the air like the beat of a colossal heart. Somewhere deep within the machine, golden light bled into white, faint, barely visible, but alive. Geralt felt it respond to him. The medallion on his chest thrummed once in harmony, and above it all, for the first time in 10,000 years, a whisper, not from the warp, not from faith, but from the man who was both, brushed across the chamber like breath. A single word. Hunter. The word lingered in the chamber like smoke. Hunter. It wasn't shouted. It wasn't divine proclamation. It was almost human, faint as a dying thought. Yet every custodian froze where he stood. The air became electric with reverence and fear. Even the sacred flames flickered lower, as if the throne itself had exhaled. Geralt could still feel it in his chest, that word vibrating through bone and memory. He didn't know if it had been spoken aloud or inside his mind. All he knew was that it had come from him. The Emperor, or what was left of him, had recognized something in the Witcher's nature, and the sound of it burned through the silence like prophecy. Morovia was the first to move. She turned to the custodians, voice steady though her pulse was visible in her throat. "You heard it too." The Emperor spoke. The custodian nearest them slowly raised his head. His voice came out reverent and trembling, an unthinkable thing from a creature bred to never doubt. "The Master has not spoken in 10,000 years. He just did," Morovia said. "And not to you." The custodians turned their golden helms toward Geralt. For the first time, he saw uncertainty behind their lenses. Not anger, fear. The kind that comes when faith collides with something it cannot explain. Geralt exhaled. The weight of the throne's gaze pressed on him like gravity. He wanted to walk away, to leave this tomb of godhood behind. But as he turned, a voice, not divine, not the Emperor's, gun came from the shadows. "You cannot walk from what you are," it said. From the far end of the chamber, an old man emerged. His robe was deep crimson, trimmed in black. His face was a map of scars and machine graphs, but his eyes burned with clarity. One of the Sigillites' descendants, perhaps, or something even older. A keeper of the Silent Watch. "You stand at the fulcrum of 10 millennia of lies," the old man said. "Do you even know what the Emperor was?" Geralt didn't answer. Morovia spoke. "He was the savior of mankind." The old man smiled faintly, sadly. "That's what we were told. That's what we had to believe. But before the Imperium, before the Warp, before the throne, there was only the dream of perfection. The Emperor was not born divine. He was made from the souls of thousands of shamans who sought to end death by merging their essence into one vessel. They wanted to master mortality. Instead, they created a prison that could never die." Geralt felt his pulse slow. A cold understanding taking root. "You're saying he was created?" "Like I was." "Yes," the old man said. "You are his mirror. A creature forged to survive through mutation, through alchemy, through pain. You are what he once was, mortal trying to imitate godhood." The custodians bristled, their halberds crackling with suppressed energy. One stepped forward. "You blaspheme before the throne." "I speak truth," the old man snapped, his voice cracking with ancient authority. "Faith without doubt is rot. Look upon your master. He is dying, not because his body fails, but because humanity no longer dreams of what he dreamed. The light fades because belief has become obedience." Morovia's gaze turned sharp. "You risk execution." "I've already died 100 times in service of silence," he replied. "Let me speak this once." He turned to Geralt. "Do you know why the Necrons came for you? It wasn't merely to erase the anomaly. It was to reclaim balance. You carry within you a fragment of the Emperor's first self. The human, not the god. The part that still remembers what it means to bleed, to doubt, to hunt. That fragment was lost in the moment he ascended to the throne. When you touched that custodian relic, it found you. Or perhaps it returned." Geralt stood still for a long moment, the hum of the throne surrounding him like the ocean. He could almost hear the whisper again beneath it. Not words, but heartbeat. "So I'm a piece of your god," he said at last. "That's the joke." Morovia's eyes softened. "Not a piece. A reflection. And reflections can shatter." The custodians shifted uneasily. One of them, his voice tight with barely contained devotion, spoke. "The Emperor does not share his soul. Whatever this echo is, it is heresy." Geralt looked up at the throne again. "Then maybe your god's heresy is the only part that's still human." The silence that followed was suffocating. The golden light above the throne pulsed once, brighter, as if the Emperor himself acknowledged the blasphemy, or agreed with it. The old man knelt, head bowed, whispering something too faint to hear. Morovia stepped closer to Geralt. "You understand what this means," she said quietly. "If word spreads that the Emperor spoke, the Imperium will tear itself apart. Every faction will claim it for their own. Ecclesiarchy, Mechanicus, Custodes. Billions will die for a single word." Geralt's voice was low. "And if we bury it?" "Then the silence continues," she said. "And maybe that's worse." He looked at her. "What would you do?" Morovia hesitated, her composure cracking for the first time. "I serve truth," she said. "But truth is a weapon that kills whoever draws it." Before he could respond, the floor beneath the throne shuddered violently. The chamber lights flickered. The custodians turned toward the sealed doors as alarms blared. "Warp breach!" shouted one of the tech adepts from the gallery above. Massive psychic displacement, now within the sanctum. Morovia drew her pistol. "Impossible. No entity can breach the Golden Palace." The old man's eyes widened. "Unless it was invited? A crack split the air. The light around the throne twisted, bending into unnatural shapes. Voices, hundreds of them, screamed from the warp breach, not with hatred but with sorrow. And through the fracture stepped a shape made of ash and light, neither demon nor human, cloaked in echoes of time. Geralt's medallion went still. The old man whispered a single word, trembling. Echo. The figure raised its head, and though its face was smoke and light, Geralt saw himself staring back. It stepped through the fracture with no sound, no scent, no weight. Yet its presence filled the chamber as if the air itself bent to carry it. The figure was made of light and shadow both, its form flickering like a candle seen through water. But what rooted Geralt to the spot was its face. It wasn't merely familiar, it was his. Every scar mirrored, every faint mark of past hunts etched into that pale surface. But the eyes burned with something his never had. They shimmered gold, not with mutation but with grief too vast to be mortal. The custodians reacted first. Bolters came up, halberds leveled, vox commands barked across the chamber. But none fired. The creature radiated something that even their genetic certainty couldn't classify. Not demon, not psychic construct, not warp echo. It was human in shape, divine in resonance, and ancient in its silence. Morovia's voice broke through the static. Hold fire. She stepped forward, face lit by the pale glow. Identify yourself. The echo's head turned toward her slowly, as if her voice had to travel across centuries to reach it. Then it spoke, and when it did, the sound was like two voices at once. One human, raw and cracked with exhaustion, the other vast and resonant, like the hum of the throne itself. I am the memory that dreamt of mercy, it said. I am what your god left behind. The words rippled through the room. Even the tech adepts faltered at their terminals. Geralt felt something inside him pull tight, like a string drawn between his heart and that impossible reflection. He spoke softly. You're not real. The reflection smiled faintly, not kind, not cruel. Neither are you by the same measure. Geralt's hand went to his sword out of instinct, though he knew steel would mean nothing here. The air shimmered as the reflection moved closer, each step silent, each motion too fluid, as if time bent to make space for it. You were made to kill monsters, it said. Do you even know what that means in a world where the greatest monster was once a man who tried to save everyone? The echo lifted its hand and reached toward the throne. The golden light pulsed in answer, threads of energy weaving between the two. The custodians flinched. The old man fell to his knees, whispering frantic litanies. Morovia's voice trembled. It's feeding on the Emperor's field. No, the echo said. It is remembering itself. Geralt stepped between them. If you're a piece of him, why now? Why me? Because the dream is dying, it replied. The Emperor's will binds humanity, but it no longer sustains it. The machine endures. The soul decays. You, Hunter, are the last thing in this galaxy still capable of wondering if there was ever another way. Geralt's jaw tightened. You mistake me for something holy. I've killed things that used to pray. And I was the thing they prayed to, the reflection said. You feel it, don't you? The pull. The silence that isn't silence. The way your blood hums when you stand near him. That's what I am. The part of him that remembered how to feel. Morovia's hand hovered over her weapon. Geralt, she said quietly, if it merges with the throne... I know, he said. But before he could act, the echo turned its gaze upon her. You fear faith because you have seen what it does to men. But tell me, Inquisitor, what happens when the god you worship starts dreaming again? Morovia froze. The reflection's eyes shone like dying stars. For a heartbeat, the vast hum of the throne fell silent. The Emperor's body, once immovable, trembled, infinitesimal but real. Lights across the sanctum dimmed as if the Astronomicon itself flickered. Stop, the old man croaked. If you awaken him, you'll undo everything. The Imperium exists because he does not dream. The echo turned to him. Then perhaps the Imperium should wake. The custodians moved as one, golden halberds whirring. Energy fields roared to life. But Geralt was faster. He moved between them and the apparition, hand out. Not in violence, but in recognition. You're trying to finish something, he said. Something he couldn't. I'm trying to remember, the echo said softly. Once I walked among men and believed they could be more than what the stars demanded. Now I am worshipped as proof that they cannot. You, Witcher, stand where he stood once, between monsters and men, and you still hesitate to decide which side deserves saving. Its words carved through him like silver. You think I haven't decided? Geralt's voice was low. I just don't think there's a side left worth dying for. The echo reached out again, this time toward him. The air bent, colors inverted, the warp itself holding its breath, and then its hand touched Geralt's chest. The contact wasn't heat or pain, and it was memory. Images burst through him. The golden fields of pre-imperial Terra. Children running beneath untainted skies. Laughter without fear. A man in plain robes teaching by firelight. Then fire, war, gods made of iron, the first throne. The last lie. When it ended, Geralt was on his knees. His heart raced as if he'd lived 10,000 years in a blink. The reflection's voice came as a whisper in his mind. Now you see, we are the same, bound by creation, defined by death. He looked up slowly. If that's true, then what happens when I kill you? The reflection smiled, that same faint, terrible smile. Then perhaps he finally wakes. Before anyone could react, the echo dissolved into light and plunged into Geralt's chest. A blinding surge erupted, throwing the custodians back. Morovia shielded her eyes. The old man screamed prayers into static. When the light faded, the echo was gone. Only Geralt remained, kneeling, breath ragged, eyes burning with a faint golden hue. Morovia rushed to him. Geralt, what happened? He looked at her, voice distant. He's dreaming again. Behind them, the throne pulsed once, vast, slow, like the heartbeat of a world. Across Terra, unseen by those who worshipped without question, the Astronomicon flickered. For the first time in 10,000 years, the Emperor's light changed color. The sound came first, low, harmonic, like 1,000 cathedral bells tolling underwater. It rolled through the chamber and into the bones of the world. Every servitor in the sanctum froze mid-motion, their optical lenses dimming. The golden glow of the throne deepened to crimson for the span of a heartbeat. Then came the pulse. Vast, slow, seismic, as if Terra itself had exhaled. Morovia stumbled as the ground shuddered beneath her boots. The custodians braced, uncertain whether to defend or pray. Geralt rose slowly from his knees. His eyes glowed faintly gold like the reflection of a dying star. What did you do? She breathed. I didn't do anything, he said. He did. At the heart of the chamber, the Emperor's body stirred. Only slightly, only once, but enough for the impossible to become real. A ripple of psychic resonance surged outward, shattering wards that had stood unbroken since the siege of Terra. Golden, circuitry across the throne's surface burned with new symbols. Ancient, sigils that hadn't been seen since the dawn of the Imperium. One of the custodians fell to his knees, helm removed, face pale with awe. He lives. No, the old man whispered, tears streaking his augmetic face. He remembers. The psychic wave struck outward, piercing through the palace's walls and into the planet beyond. Every astropath on Terra screamed at once. Fox networks burned out. The Astronomicon, that constant pillar of the Imperium's navigation, wavered like a candle in a gale. Across the void, ships veered off course, their Geller fields flaring as the warp itself writhed. Geralt felt the surge within him, like fire behind his ribs. The echo, the fragment of the Emperor's lost humanity, was now part of him. Its pulse matched his heartbeat. He could feel the throne's power moving through him, ancient, mournful, and alive. Morovia steadied herself against a shattered pillar. You've become a conduit, she said. He's using you. Geralt's expression didn't change. Then maybe it's time he spoke through something that still bleeds. Above them, the massive golden doors of the sanctum burst open. Custodian reinforcements flooded in, their halberds raised, armor radiant in the firelight. Behind them, banners of the ecclesiarchy trailed like wings of flame. Priests, confessors, flagellants, all chanting in terror and ecstasy. The Emperor speaks. One of the priests screamed. Praise be to his renewed dominion. Morovia drew her weapon, voice sharp. No one leaves this chamber. If this leaks, it's too late, Geralt said. He's already everywhere. Across Terra, the faithful fell to their knees. In hive cities, manufactura, orbital spires, billions felt a presence move through their thoughts, ancient and vast. Some called it salvation. Others heard only silence and wept. The Astronomicon's beam fractured into concentric rings, each pulse carrying not stability but change. Inside the sanctum, the golden body on the throne trembled again. Blood, dark metallic, impossibly real, traced a line down the Emperor's withered face. The first drop fell, striking the marble with a sound that echoed like thunder. "The throne bleeds," whispered the old man. "I never thought I'd live to see it." Morovia's eyes widened. "This is not resurrection. This is collapse." Geralt's voice was calm, but the strain was visible now. Sweat on his brow, veins like wires beneath the skin. Maybe collapse is what he wanted. Maybe dying is the only way to live again. She shook her head. If he dies, the Astronomicon dies with him. The Imperium will be blind. Geralt met her gaze. And if he lives as he is, it stays dead in every other way. Before she could reply, the throne flared. Golden flame erupted from its base, wreathing the chamber in unbearable light. The custodians fell back, shields raised, voices lost in the roar. The light didn't burn, and it revealed. For an instant, they saw everything the Emperor had seen. The birth of stars, the fall of gods, the faces of every soul who had ever prayed for meaning in the dark. Then the light fractured, splitting into a million shards of radiance that flew outward into the void. Each one carried a piece of that dream, that memory of what mankind could have been. Across the galaxy, psychers convulsed as visions poured through them. Cities of light, humanity unchained, the end of war. And then, as quickly as it began, the visions turned to screams. Morovia clutched her head. "He's breaking apart." Geralt's voice came through the storm, rough and steady. Not breaking, spreading. The golden body sagged against its bindings. Blood streamed freely now, glowing like molten sunfire. The machinery of the throne screeched as though alive, straining to contain what could no longer be contained. The old man reached toward the throne, whispering through tears. "Mercy, just once, my lord. Mercy." A single tendril of light broke free and touched his outstretched hand. In that instant, his body disintegrated into dust, but his face, before it vanished, wore a look of peace. Geralt turned to Morovia. "You have to get out now." "I'm not leaving you." He smiled faintly. "You don't have a choice." He stepped forward toward the throne, the golden light swirling around him like wind made of memory. The custodians shouted, but none dared interfere. Geralt raised his hand, palm glowing faintly with the echo's power. "If you ever were human," he whispered to the Emperor, "remember what that felt like." The throne answered not with words, but with a pulse, a final, titanic surge that shook the palace to its core. The blast consumed Geralt and the sanctum in a halo of gold and red. Outside, across Terra, millions looked skyward as the Astronomicon flared one last time, then dimmed, replaced by a softer, pulsing light. Not blinding, not divine, just alive. When the glow faded, the throne stood empty, only a trail of blood still warm, marked where man and myth had touched. Morovia stood amid the ruin, her voice breaking. "He's gone." One of the custodians knelt where Geralt had vanished. "Gone?" he said softly. "Or ascended?" No one answered. Outside, the sky above Terra bled gold for 3 days and nights. And far across the void, somewhere between stars, a lone figure walked through a place that wasn't the warp, carrying 2 hearts that beat as one. There was no sky where he awoke, no ground beneath his feet, only the quiet shimmer of endless void. It wasn't the warp, it wasn't real space either. It was something in between, a corridor of light and memory woven from the pulse of dying gods. Geralt stood alone, surrounded by a faint luminescence that breathed like a living thing. The silence wasn't empty. It was full of whispers, of echoes of prayers long forgotten, of names carved into the marrow of humanity's oldest dream. He looked down at his hands. The veins beneath his skin glowed faintly gold, like fire trapped under frost. His medallion hung silent against his chest. For the first time in 1,000 lifetimes, it didn't tremble. There were no monsters here. Not anymore, he walked. Or perhaps it was that the world moved around him. Every step brought visions. Not hallucinations, not illusions, but memories bleeding through the seams of time. He saw a child on ancient Terra, standing in a field of sunlit grain, his face calm and curious. He saw the rise of empires, the fall of gods, the first forging of the throne, and always through it all, the same face in the Emperor's young and unscarred, watching humanity grow and break and begin again. "You're still here," Geralt murmured. The voice came from nowhere and everywhere at once. "As are you." The light around him shifted, coalescing into the faint outline of the reflection, the echo he had absorbed. It looked at him with quiet understanding. "You carried me across the threshold." Geralt's expression was unreadable. "If that's true, where does that leave you now?" "Nowhere," the echo said softly. "Everywhere. I am the breath between prayers, the pause before a soldier's death. I am what remains of what he once wished to be." Geralt's gaze darkened. "And me?" "You are his question." The words lingered like incense. Geralt turned away, the endless void unfolding into distant stars. He recognized some of them, or thought he did, though their constellations had shifted. The galaxy was different now. He could feel it in the way the light trembled. Something fundamental had changed. Across the void, worlds whispered. The Astronomicon had not gone dark. It had transformed. Instead of a blinding beacon of faith, it now pulsed like a heartbeat, slower, softer, alive. The Emperor's will no longer crushed the warp into submission. It moved with it, balancing on the edge between order and chaos. The Imperium, long built on the silence of its god, now trembled under the weight of his awakening. On Holy Terra, the ecclesiarchy tore itself apart. Some proclaimed that the Emperor had ascended into true divinity, his bleeding body a final miracle. Others declared it the sign of his death, the end of the great work. The custodian sealed the palace in mourning. The Mechanicus began to worship the empty throne itself, and yet amidst all the noise there were whispers of a figure walking the outer worlds. A man with white hair and golden eyes who spoke little and carried no sigil, no banner, no name. He moved through battlefields after the guns had fallen silent, tending to the dying, burying the forgotten. In every war-torn hive and ash-ridden wasteland, people began to speak of him, not as a prophet, not as a soldier, but as something older. The pale saint, they called him on one world, the ghost of the golden throne on another. But among the downtrodden and faithless, he had a simpler name. The hunter. Geralt didn't seek worship. He didn't even seek redemption. He hunted still, though not beasts of flesh and fang. He hunted the things that had always haunted mankind: despair, fanaticism, the hunger for control. He became a rumor that spread where the Imperium's light faltered, a shadow that reminded men they were still capable of mercy. In time, he came to a planet shrouded in perpetual dusk. A ruined forge world, long abandoned, its manufactura filled with echoes of prayers whispered by machines that no longer moved. There in the silence, he found a fragment of the throne's golden circuitry buried beneath ash. When he touched it, warmth bloomed through his veins. The voice came again, softer now, fainter but unmistakable. "You've done what I could not." Geralt knelt, his hand resting on the fragment. "I didn't save them. I just reminded them what dying feels like. That is salvation enough." He closed his eyes. "What happens now?" The voice paused as though thinking. "Now humanity dreams again. And where there is dream, there is danger, but also choice." The light within the fragment dimmed, flickered, and was gone. Geralt stood there for a long time, the silence heavy but not hollow. He looked up at the distant stars. They pulsed softly, not with divine command, but with something warmer, smaller, truer. He sheathed his sword and began to walk once more, his boots stirring the dust of forgotten prayers. Somewhere far above, the Astronomicon beat like a human heart, imperfect but alive. The galaxy would never be the same. The Imperium would fracture, bleed, and rebuild 1,000 times. But beneath the endless wars and shifting faiths, a single truth endured: that even in a universe ruled by gods and monsters, humanity's greatest strength had never been power, or purity, or faith. It had been the capacity to remember. And so, the Witcher who had once hunted beasts now hunted oblivion. A solitary figure walking between light and shadow, carrying the last ember of the Emperor's dream in the hollow of his chest. When the stars flickered, they said it was his passing. When the Astronomicon pulsed irregularly, they said it was his heartbeat. But those who saw him and lived to tell of it said otherwise. They said that the hunter didn't die. He simply walked on, toward the next world that had forgotten what it meant to be human. And somewhere in the endless dark, the Emperor's voice, weary, almost human again, whispered through him one final time. "Keep watch. Old friend." Geralt looked to the stars. Always, the light dimmed. The silence deepened, And the dream of man, fragile, flawed, infinite, endured.